Julia Whitmore rose early each morning to paint in the crisp air of Russet Ridge. She loved the gentle hum of the sleepy mountain town, the smell of strong coffee drifting from the local cafe, and the warm glow of the sunrise over misty hills. There was serenity here that she found nowhere else, a quiet hush that fed her creativity and soothed her hurried thoughts. Her home studio was at the top of a creaking wooden staircase in a modest cabin near the outskirts of town, where the forest began its climb into the mountains. It was here one morning that she made a discovery which would rattle the calm of her beloved Russet Ridge. Her first brushstroke of the day was a vibrant turquoise, a color as alive as the springtime sky. She was refurbishing an old canvas she had bought inexpensively from the local antique shop, Thompson's Treasures, an assortment of old paintings, furniture, and knickknacks jumbled together in a musty back room. Julia had chosen this one because she liked its wooden frame, well-worn but elegantly carved, with acorn and vine motifs. She often repurposed frames and painted over existing works, giving them new life in her own style. When her brush grazed the canvas near the top edge, she felt a rough patch. The paint beneath had begun to peel, revealing another layer. Carefully, she set her paintbrush aside, took a small scraper from her art tools, and gently tested the area where the paint bubbled. Flakes of chipped paint dropped onto the floor. Slowly and steadily, more of the long-given layer came into view. At first, the faint lines didn't resemble anything, but the more Julia revealed, the clearer it became. She wasn't looking at a previous painting's landscape or portrait. She was seeing what appeared to be a crude map. The shapes not of hills or still life or any typical subject matter. It was a rough outline of the area around Russet Ridge, with wavy lines to indicate the ridges and a tiny mark where a town might be. Intrigued, Julia put aside her original morning project. She turned all her attention to the underlying image. An hour later, she had uncovered a fair portion of what looked like the entire map. Old paint flaked off in her careful hands, revealing a time-worn label scrawled across the lower edge. Grant's Cellar. The script was bold but old-fashioned, the strokes thick and purposeful. The paint had a faint brownish tint, possibly from natural pigments used many decades before. She recognized the name Grant from certain local rumors and a bit of local lore. There had allegedly been a hidden speakeasy somewhere in town during Prohibition. Some folks claimed it was inside an old orchard barn. Others said it was in the basement of the defunct newspaper office. No one had ever pinned down the exact location. Grant's Cellar was often whispered as a place of lively jazz, dancing and contraband liquor, but it was said to have disappeared after a raid. The building allegedly collapsed under suspicious circumstances, or so the story went. Eyes bright with curiosity, Julia retrieved her phone and snapped a few photos of the uncovered map. Then she made a copy of it by tracing it onto a sheet of transparent paper. She recognized the rough shape of the ridges and compared it to a modern tourist map of Russet Ridge. After careful study, she concluded that the hidden map indicated an area very close to where the old orchard had once stood, just off Redwood Lane. The orchard was mostly decimated by now abandoned fences and wild gnarled apple trees left to go feral. If the painting's hidden layer was truly a map from the Prohibition era, it might lead to the rumored Speakeasy, or at least the remains of it. She was no historian, but she knew one. Abruptly shutting the door behind her, she tucked the painting in a padded bag, hopped in her old pickup, and drove straight to the Russet Ridge Historical Society. The staff archivist, Mark Denning, was a friend of hers. He was in his mid-30s, wore spectacles forever sliding down his nose, and had an encyclopedic knowledge of the region's past. Upon her arrival, Mark was fussing over a large trifle display about the area's logging history. He perked up the moment Julia entered with her unusual haul. "Well, this is quite a surprise. What have you found this time?" he asked, a playful smile tugging at his lips. Julia carefully placed the painting on the wide reading table. "I was repainting over this old canvas "And guess what I found," she said, tilting it so Mark could see the faint marks of the map. She explained her process, pointing out the spot labelled Grant's Cellar. Mark's eyes lit with excitement. "I've heard plenty about a hidden speakeasy," he said. "One of my grandmother's old diaries even hinted that she knew the owners, a family named Grant who vanished after a liquor raid in 1931. But official records are sparse. If the place was hidden, and especially if it was hastily abandoned, there could be all sorts of secrets down there." Together they pored over the painting for several hours, comparing the marks to old maps of the town. Mark cross-referenced a few typed documents from the Historical Society's filing cabinet. "Ah, here," he said, pulling up a brittle page from the deep recesses of a metal drawer. "It seems there was a Redwood Lane orchard owned by a man named Lawrence Grant. This orchard was rumored to be a cover-up for his illegal bar operation. The orchard was closed in 1932. Julia's heart fluttered at the thought of discovering tangible history that had lain hidden beneath decades of paint. "I want to check it out," she said. "Will you come with me?" Mark pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose, scanning the old document a moment longer. "Yes. I'll bring my camera and a notepad. We might need to get permission to search the property, but if it's abandoned, we can at least walk the perimeter. Who knows what we'll find?" They agreed to set out the following morning. That night, Julia tossed and turned in anticipation. She could hardly wait. She was determined to see with her own eyes the place that may have once been a hidden secret of Russet Ridge. Who knew what stories were buried amid the crumbling foundations? The next day dawned bright, with a scent of wildflowers and a gentle breeze rolling over the hills. Julia picked up Mark in her truck, and they headed beyond the main street, following Redwood Lane as it turned from paved to dirt. They passed old ranch houses with sagging roofs until at last they reached a brush-choked property ringed by rusted wire fence. Grey apple trees with gnarled branches dotted the uneven rows. A lonely wooden sign read, "Grant Orchard," in chipped white paint, clearly decades old. It creaked in the breeze as they approached. "This is it," Mark said, double-checking the map they had drawn from the painting. "We should check near that big oak. The map indicated something around this area, presumably the old orchard barn site." Julia noticed a tall oak leaning precariously near a partially collapsed structure. The barn's roof was half fallen in. Broken boards and split beams littered the ground. She stepped carefully around them. She couldn't help but feel a spine-tingling thrill when she spotted a foundation corner made of crumb. Perhaps this was the entry to the hidden cellar. Sure enough, tucked behind one of the leaning barn walls was an old iron cellar door. Rust had consumed the hinges, and a heavy padlock kept it sealed. Julia inhaled sharply. Visions of a dark, musty basement filled her mind. Her heart pounded with excitement. Mark moved closer, adjusting his glasses. "Well, the lock looks ancient," he said. "It might be easier to go round the other side. Maybe a portion of the cellar collapsed, leaving an opening." They navigated the perimeter of the barn, pushing aside wild vines. Then Julia spotted a large gap in the foundation. Past the jagged edges of broken brick, she could see a few steps descending into darkness. Together, they paused to switch on the flashlights they had brought along. "Careful now," Mark said. "This place could be unstable." But the thought of discovery spurred them on, down the short flight of steps into what was clearly a cellar or basement. Once inside, the cool, musty air was thick with dust that swirled in shafts of light from above. Rotting floorboards hung overhead, broken barrels and crates were scattered throughout, along with shards of green glass from what might have been bottled liquor once upon a time. Julia's flashlight illuminated walls made of cinder blocks. The narrower end of the space was a small bar area, with planks forming a crude counter. The remains of a chipped porcelain sink peeked from the shadows. It sent her imagination reeling. Music, laughter, the tink of glasses and hushed voices evading the law. All from decades past, echoing faintly in the gloom. "Grant's cellar?" Julia breathed. shining her light at the far side of the basement. "This is it," Mark nodded, stepping carefully among fallen timbers. He beamed with a kind of scholastic glee and pulled out his notepad to scribble details. "Look at these old advertisements on the wall." He pointed at a peeling poster half stuck to the brick, a black and white illustration of a woman in flapper attire, brandishing a cocktail glass. "This is definitely from the late 1920s or early 1930. I can't believe this is still here with all this weathering." Julia moved toward a pile of detritus near the far corner. She noticed a metal box peeking out beneath rotted wood. "Look here," she called softly. She cleared away the wood, revealing what looked like a small lockbox. The top was crusted with dirt and rust, but with a bit of effort the latch gave way. Inside lay old photographs, brittle with age, depicting men in suits and bow ties, women in fringed dresses, all smiling in that regal stillness of old black and white prints. There was also a ledger with spidery writing that listed figures. Columns described certain liquor stocks, dates, and names, probably patrons or suppliers. Julia and Mark studied a few of the lines. One name caught Mark's eye: E. Thompson. He blinked. Thompson's Treasures? Belongs to an Everett Thompson, whose grandfather started that store back in the 1940s. "You found this painting at Thompson's? Coincidence?" Julia felt a twinge of suspicion, though it was overshadowed by her excitement. Maybe the painting was in their family all along. Maybe they didn't realize it had a hidden map. "This is unbelievable." After making a number of careful notes and snapping pictures, they decided that bringing the entire metal box out into the sunshine would be wise, so they could examine it more thoroughly. Julia carefully tucked it under her arm, and the two climbed back out of the cellar, hearts racing anew at their find. By the time evening approached, Julia was slumped with exhaustion in Mark's office at the Historical Society. She had spent most of the afternoon cleaning and gently preserving the photos and ledger pages using Mark's recommended techniques. She listened in fascination as Mark pieced together more of the story. According to local law, the orchard was the front. Grant's cellar was the actual operation, and folks from all over the county came to dance, drink, and have a good time. That was until a big raid in 1931. The story says that the place was boarded up afterward and the orchard shut down soon after. The Grants themselves moved away. I'm still trying to figure out where. But how did Thompson's end up with the painting? Julia wondered aloud. That's the missing link. The ledger mentions an E. Thompson as a patron or a middleman. Maybe the families were connected. The next morning, Julia decided to seek some answers at Thompson's Treasures. She found Everett Thompson near the back of the shop, carefully arranging old clocks on a shelf. He was an older gentleman, wiry with a neat moustache. She explained in broad strokes about uncovering a hidden painting that showed the orchard location. She avoided too many specifics, deciding she wanted to gauge his reaction. At the mention of Grant's cellar, Everett's eyes flickered with recognition. "You know about that?" he said softly, an edge of discomfort in his tone. "I guess you found more than you bargained for with that painting." Julia didn't move, waiting for him to reveal more. He gave a hesitant shrug. "My grandfather was a frequent patron, from what little I've been told. He and the Grants weren't especially close, but he'd go for some music and a drink, same as a lot of folks back then. The orchard was common knowledge, just hush-hush. After the raid he managed to salvage some items. It was a different era. People took what they could, I suppose. He had that painting around the store for decades. My father told me it was worthless. We kept it stored in the bag." She studied him carefully. "Did you know there was a map hidden underneath?" Everett lifted his bushy eyebrows. "Not at all. It was an old painting of a bowl of fruit, as far as I knew. If I had known it hid something, I might have tried to preserve it. But it's all yours now." Something about the way he spoke seemed genuine. He didn't appear to be hiding anything sinister. just recalling old family tales. Still, Julia couldn't help but feel that there was more to glean. "We found a ledger mentioning an E. Thompson. That was your grandfather?" He nodded slowly. "I expect so. His name was Edgar Thompson. I don't know all the details, to tell you the truth. A bit hush-hush, family secrets, you know. It wouldn't surprise me if he was deeper in that lifestyle than he let on, but with that era behind us, it's mostly just stories." Julia thanked him politely, leaving with a swirl of unanswered questions. She mulled over the story all the way home. While she doubted Everett Thompson was anything but a caretaker of old family relics, the mention of family secrets piqued her curiosity. Was there something else hidden at the orchard? Something no one had found? Over the next week, ongoing rumor and chatter about the Speakeasy find spread across Russet Ridge. Mark was preparing an exhibit for the Historical Society. Old photographs, the ledger, and some of the discovered items. Julia spent her free moments polishing and gently restoring the old painting frame without damaging the hidden map. She had become something of a local celebrity for her discovery. Friends and neighbors would pop by her studio to marvel at the painting. Yet she felt there was a piece missing. Something about the orchard felt unresolved. One afternoon she returned to the orchard alone, her camera in hand. The day was warm and dusty golden sunlight filtered through the tangled branches. Inside the cellar, she poked around more carefully, now that she had time without the initial rush of discovery. Stacked along the far wall were collapsed crates. As her flashlight passed over them, she noticed one crate that looked sturdier than the others. An intact wooden chest with the Grant family's initials. She gently pried the top open. Inside, she discovered more personal effects: a tarnished silver cocktail shaker, an old journal with water-stained pages, and a few small items of clothing. Carefully, she opened the journal. The first pages had neat, slanted handwriting, marked with dates from 1930. Flipping through, she caught glimpses of daily tasks: apple harvest estimates, shipments, mentions of a friend in Chicago shipping whiskey. She became absorbed in reading, losing track of time. Suddenly, she heard a rustle from the cellar steps and froze. Her heart hammered. Who would be out here? She switched off the flashlight. The cellar was nearly pitch black. She remained still, listening. The shuffle of footsteps grew louder. Lowering herself to hide behind the crate, she clutched the journal. The footsteps continued, scuffing along the floor above, near the orchard barn's sagging boards. Then, a shadow moved over what little light filtered through the gap. A moment later, she heard her name called softly in a familiar voice. "Julia? Are you down here?" Relief washed over her. "Mark!" she hissed. She switched the flashlight back on, seeing his form appear at the top of the cellar steps, beam shining. "Julia, you scared me," he said. "I came by your studio. You weren't there. I had a hunch you might be here, but it's getting late." He made his way down carefully. "You shouldn't be in this barn alone. The structure could be dangerous." Julia inhaled deeply. "You're right. Sorry. I just wanted to look around a bit more." Mark's eyes fell on the open chest. He whistled softly, stepping forward to examine the items inside. "I see you found more artifacts. This journal looks like it belonged to Lawrence Grant himself." Incredible. In that moment, Julia realized the orchard was more than a historical curiosity. These were real lives, real families, who quietly defied Prohibition. She gently packed the items from the chest back into place, then carried them out of the cellar with Mark's help. They decided to turn them over to the Historical Society for preservation. She resolved to read the journal more thoroughly, though, because something about it called to her, as if the orchard's last caretaker still had a story to share. Back in Mark's office that evening, she opened the journal to the final pages and read aloud while he listened, scribbling notes. June 10, 1931. "We have word that the authorities are planning a raid. We must shutter the place, hide goods. Edgar says he will help, has a place to stash the painting. He believes it might keep the orchard safe, as we have ties to many in town." June 12. 1931. They are coming tonight. God help us. I cannot imagine losing everything we built. The orchard is our life. But if this is what it takes to survive, we'll do it. Edgar will keep the painting until this passes. If we can't stay, we'll leave for a time. Maybe we shall one day return. She paused, turning the page, but it was blank. It ends there, she said, her breath catching in her throat. Mark looked thoughtful. So Edgar Thompson hid the painting, presumably to keep knowledge of the cellar location hidden. But eventually the orchard was raided, or the Grants had to flee. Over time, that painting changed hands in the Thompson family until it wound up at the antique shop, waiting for you to uncover its secret. Julia smoothed a hand over the yellowed page. She felt a pang of sadness for the Grants, forced to abandon the orchard and fade silently into history. At least we've restored a piece of that history, she murmured. In the following days, news spread of the journal's existence. The local paper wrote a short article celebrating the rediscovery of Grant's cellar, praising Julia for her unexpected find. The orchard was recognized officially as a local historical site thanks to Mark's thorough documentation. The hidden speakeasy from the Prohibition era had, at last, found its place in the annals of Russet Ridge's colorful past. As for Julia, she spent her time finishing a new painting inspired by her adventures in the cellar. The canvas depicted the old orchard's twisted branches silhouetted against a moonlit sky, a homage to the clandestine nights that once filled the space with music and whispered secrets. She submitted it to the upcoming gallery show in town with a small plaque that read, "Dedicated to the Grant family and all they left behind." On the day of the gallery opening, townspeople came to admire her art and chat about the orchard's hidden history. Everett Thompson even stopped by, offering subdued thanks for the care Julia had taken with the legacy his grandfather had once guarded. He admitted some relief that the truth was finally out in the open. Standing amid the appreciative crowd, Julia couldn't help but smile. Her find had brought Russet Ridge closer, reminding everyone of how the threads of the past are interwoven with the present. She sipped a cup of spiced cider, warmth settling in her chest. Sometimes, she mused, it only took a careful look beneath the surface to reveal a vibrant story that had been patiently waiting for someone to listen. A few days later, she decided to stop by the orchard one last time before the property was sealed off for safety measures. She walked slowly among the crooked trees, letting her thoughts wander through images of the cellar's heyday. Imagining the lively nights of hidden laughter, the hush of secrecy beneath the bright orchard moonlight. She realized that the orchard was no mere ruin. It was a testament to perseverance, to creativity and camaraderie under the shadow of the law. And how incredible that a half-forgotten canvas, with layers upon layers of paint, could become the key to unlocking it all. Before leaving, she laid a small wildflower bouquet against the old barn foundation, a gesture of respect for those who had passed through its doors long ago. Then she walked away, heart brimming with gratitude for the quiet mountain town that always seemed to cradle a new story beneath each fallen leaf, waiting only for someone with a painter's eye and an adventurous spark to uncover it.